Hi. As someone who has gone to travel a lot and plans on exploring more of the world, I want to do tourism the proper way. And in my video essay, I will share one perspective on how to travel in our progressively post-colonial world, which I refer to as anti-colonial tourism. First, anti-colonial tourism engages local perspectives. This means incorporating indigenous experiences, whether just talking to a local while passing by, attending events put on by locals, or anything of the sort. Anti-colonial tourism involves the local population. In my own experience, I went on an American-founded cruise line to the Bahamas. Something that I found interesting was that one port we stopped at was an island owned entirely by the cruise line. When we got off the boat, the island had a huge archway with the company name and a bunch of tacky colors. The sole purpose of this island was either a water park on one half or a massive pool bar and cabana setup on the other. I find this cruise commission island to be a prime example of colonial tourism. As passengers, we're buying tickets to have fun on the cruise, of course, but we also booked the Bahamas for a reason. Taking us to the manufactured island in the Atlantic Ocean defeats the whole purpose of even traveling to a foreign territory. Also, there simply can't be engagement with local perspectives because everyone on the tacky island is a tourist. Secondly, anti-colonial tourism challenges hegemonic narratives. When one plans or idealizes a trip somewhere, he carries a certain assumption about that place. When he hasn't gotten to experience it yet, he relies on the internet and media or word of mouth. Actually packing up and going abroad will enlighten him with a new perspective, but this doesn't necessarily mean that traveling itself is anti-colonial. In my example, perhaps one wants to experience the Bahamas, so they go on the cruise and realize that the Bahamas is nothing more than a tacky colored water park and boozy line of cabanas by the pool. So, to make tourism anti-colonial, one must challenge hegemonic narratives. This starts with my first point: interact with locals. Don't book solely tourist activities and leave some room for taking in the indigenous culture. Third, anti-colonial tourism has an ethical or political purpose beyond personal enjoyment. This may sound daunting, but it's actually very doable. Personal enjoyment is the reason most of us become tourists. We're on vacation. Perhaps we're taking on this role for a school trip or a study abroad program. But overall, we want to balance having a good time with learning about another part of the world. I challenge all tourists to add a third motive: making the world a better place. This draws back on my two earlier points: local engagement and challenging hegemonic depictions. Contributing to anti-colonialism as a tourist can be as simple as making a post on one social media private story about something they learned while abroad. Or a tourist can take it upon himself to learn even a bit of an indigenous language or religious custom, stepping out of his comfort zone to incrementally integrate the globe with kindness and respect. Having established what I mean by anti-colonial tourism, I use a social media influencer as a case study of my argument. Benjamin de Almeida, whose YouTube page is called Ben of the Week, is a content creator that uses his platform to make videos across various topics. But I specifically focus on his travel vlogs. To me, he is an inspiration because his travel activities and insights are unlike any other travel influencers I'd seen in the past. He's an example of the anti-colonial tourism I describe. Lastly, my thesis for this video is: through his travel videos in North Korea, Dubai, and Denmark, Greenland, Ben shows how tourism can function as an anti-colonial practice when it prioritizes local voices, resists hegemonic assumptions, and mobilizes for global benefit, revealing that tourism is not inherently colonial, but politically contingent. Before turning to Ben as my case study, I want to briefly refer to scholarly work on colonialism and tourism. Beginning with Daryl Tard's book, Fiji, his 11th chapter, Tourism, represents the perspective of a white local Fijian accommodating to the country's ever-present tourism industry. Chart contrasts past colonial views of Fiji with modern touristic ideas. He describes how Fijians used to be portrayed as cannibalistic savages, but in the new wave of tourism, Fiji is conveyed as a land of natural beauty, charmed by the Fijian people. Furthermore, he recognizes that by the beginning of the 21st century, tourism was the #1 foreign exchange earner for Fiji. It had surpassed sugar, garments, gold, and all other colonial industries. So, by contrasting these two perspectives, he actually demonstrates that the tourism industry has evolved from a colonial past. Foreign land acquisition and economic independence on tourism are modern colonial practices facilitated by tourism. When we act as tourists, our actions become anti-colonial when we address these realities and acknowledge indigenous voices. Secondly, I focus on how states manufacture themselves as brands, producing hegemonic narratives to appeal to tourists. In Quete de Places, welfare state, middle-class nationalism, and xenophobia, the political scientist offers an anti-colonial counter-argument to the hegemony that Denmark is the happiest nation on earth. Her argument rests in the fact that the country's leaders perpetuate this narrative on exclusion. Denmark's identity relies on the Nordic model, free market capitalism and a homogeneous, equal society of happy people that all enjoy a middle-class status. The Danish fantasy then posits that the only thing prohibiting the Nordic model from functioning without friction are the hordes of foreign immigrants who mooch on the system and thereby wreck it. She's describing how Denmark's relative happiness and favorable economic standard of living is built by blocking access to unfavorable subjects. She offers up a passage from Danish national newspaper Berlingske Tidende. Dane is something you become and are because you want to be, and because you, in words and actions, show that you feel like a part of Denmark. If you live in a ghetto and are one of those whose fault it is that the police and firemen can't do their jobs because of excessive harassment, or if you, for example, insist on being a member of his Utahrir or other organizations that openly despise all Western and thereby Danish values, then you are perhaps technically a Dane because you are a Danish citizen, but you are not, in the strict sense, Danish. This passage illustrates my overall point that states selectively craft an image of themselves to serve their narrative. Whether it is coming off as the happiest country on earth or just generally welcoming to tourists, state brand construction is a colonial process. My third author, Akbar Keshkodkar, scholar in history and sociology at Moravian College, builds upon the concept of state-sponsored branding, but in Dubai as opposed to Denmark. In his work, State-Directed Tourism, Branding, and Cultural Production in Dubai, UAE, he writes, "The Dubai brand, as highlighted by the mottos used for promoting the city, depicts Dubai as a science fiction fantasy, a hyper-real destination with iconographic development focused on luxury and high social stature, combining retail/wholesale, shopping, and entertainment where people can experience novelty. The constant development of iconic structures represents the non-traditional, out-of-this-world architectural development through which Dubai projects its image to tourists and the world. These iconic architectural structures not only serve as the tools of economic and cultural transformation for the Emirate, but also aim to produce an image of the Dubai brand focusing on quality and innovation. Similar to Denmark's image of economic prosperity, Dubai promotes an image of affluence, specifically targeted at tourists. This targeting frames my second point of anti-colonial tourism. It challenges hegemonic narratives, meaning it doesn't accept state-promoted depiction of utopia, but instead finds the cracks in these messages. Keshkodkar validates my line of reasoning, writing. Surrounded by these symbols and signs, the extent to which an individual is able to engage in the conspicuous consumption of the Dubai brand shapes the way they define their cultural experience. Tourists and the way they decide to engage with the Dubai culture can take away very different experiences. The colonial mythology will produce an opposing message to the anti-colonial approach, which I cover in Ben's trip to Dubai. Apart from the perspective of tourists, Khashoggi reveals how lower-class urban communities in Dubai are harmed by the making of the brand. He argues, these marginalized urban spaces often serve as staging grounds for maintaining the Dubai brand, where the majority of residents are part of the expatriate, non-Western laboring class and have toiled in building the infrastructure and urban environment that constitute the Dubai brand. So, much like Denmark's exclusion of the non-Danish, Dubai excludes non-Western laborers from the Dubai image. He continues, the only category of expatriates that can continue to live the Dubai fantasy for an extended period of time are those who are wealthy and have financial resources to continue consuming the Dubai brand. My encompassing point is that both Denmark and Dubai marginalize communities who don't fit their preferred identities in order to convey their desired brand to the world. The takeaway from all three of these authors is that modern colonialism and tourism are deeply intertwined. Tart's work represents the evolution of tourism from the centuries-old global colonial network. Duplessis and Khashoggi both convey how countries represent their brand on an international scale, the Danish by favoring those who are through and through Danish, and Dubai by subjugating the non-affluent, urban, and non-Western classes. By building these systems domestically, they successfully produce their utopian images to the globe. In this, tourism becomes dangerous when it isn't anti-colonial, because it only perpetuates hegemonic structures that harm those internally subjected to them. In his video, I Went to North Korea, Ben de Almeida presents his DMZ visit more as a human experience than as a dangerous spectacle. The video focuses on his day-long interaction with the South Korean tour guide, shedding light on their shared meals, jokes, and small moments. This approach resists demeaning the region to nothing other than an international threat. Although Ben's choice to wear a dog costume and howl at North Korea in response to Kim Jong-un's reported 2020 dog ban comes off as a joke, it showcases the limits of performative resistance in tourism. In the concluding time, the video shifts away from spectacle when Ben uses his platform to raise funds for Korean animal rights advocates, KARA, realigning attention and resources toward real support. This switch in his video's content from parody to activism shows that anti-colonial tourism doesn't need complex politics or organized activism. It's defined by his motivations and the action put behind it. When travel goes beyond just consumption and moves towards engagement, accountability, and practical support, it moves away from outsider observation and evolves into an anti-colonial ethic. In I Went to the Dubai They Tried to Hide, Ben intentionally switches between the refined spaces of Dubai's tourist brand and the labor infrastructures that maintain it. He begins his journey exploring luxury, malls with indoor aquariums, man-made islands never finished, and Western-crafted experiences of consumer culture in a desert. Despite the affluence he adventures, he continuously critiques unnecessary products or plainly manufactured products throughout the video. With his hotel near labor camps, he identifies buses of identically dressed workers. By outwardly speaking about passport confiscation of laborers and modern-day slavery, Ben exposes the inequity produced by Dubai's state-sponsored image. His approach of contrasting opposing worlds, a rich consumerist one with a labor-intensive hidden world, reflects Akbar's Khashoggi's argument that Dubai operates as a manufactured luxury brand, one that depends on the systematic exclusion of non-Western laborers from citizenship and a sense of recognition. Instead of settling for a one-dimensional narrative of utopia, Ben refuses to go along with hegemonic tourism by addressing the human rights violation occurring right in front of him. In doing so, his video exemplifies how anti-colonial tourism functions not through bystanding, but through exposure, exposing the labor, inequality, and environmental disaster that make the Dubai image achievable. Ben's adventure through Denmark and Greenland showcased two intensely contrasting approaches to tourism, one being molded by the brand of the state, and the other centered in an open heart and interaction. Ben's schedule when he visits Denmark emphasizes experiences curated for his purpose of being there, happiness. He goes on a happiness tour, visits the Happiness Museum, attends a local comedy show, and stumbles upon a music festival, which all attempt to persuade the tourists of the national Danish brand. By participating in this mode of tourism, Gitte de Plessis would argue for the advancement of the hegemonic Danish understanding, because the happiness tourist attractions are literally putting Denmark's national image on display for visitors to consume during their indefinite stay. Taking on the latter touristic strategy when he travels to the saddest country in the world, as opposed to the happiest, Ben dines with locals to hear their stories, is invited to and attends a foreign spiritual worship gathering, which is of the Baha'i faith, and explores the emptiness of the country. The lack of materiality in Greenland represents colonial subjugation, as opposed to Denmark's fallen colonial empire. Ben's emphasis on local interaction in Greenland versus his activity consumption in Denmark reveals colonial and anti-colonial tourism. While hegemonic consumption reproduces state-manufactured branding, anti-colonial tourism contributes to the bettering of the global socio-economy, focuses on experience through humility and a willingness to engage. I utilize an influencer as my case study because as a content creator, he has a unique position as a cultural intermediary. On Ben's platform, he can compare hegemonic perspectives with his own during his travels. As someone who is deeply familiar with popular media and a younger generation, he can relate to his viewers. His critical comparisons will then be relatable to his audience. While there are limitations with putting influencers up to this task, such as monetization and commercial motivations, the easy accessibility of influencers' platforms make them favorable candidates for promoting anti-colonial tourism. And Ben provides a great example for that. Examining the Dubai, North Korea, and Denmark and Greenland cases provided by Ben's YouTube videos all together, it becomes apparent that tourism can't be a neutral phenomenon. Tourism, when it becomes all about consumption of activities, items, or ideas, perpetuates the state-sponsored brand, which excludes groups and individuals from citizenship, a sense of security, and contentment. But when tourism centers on gaining experience with an open mind and interaction with locals is prioritized, it represents anti-colonialism and pushes back hegemonic narratives. In conclusion, tourism can either recreate empires or instruct travelers how to think in a new way. So, the next time you go on a trip, keep in mind the constant messages that are being perpetuated to you, and force yourself to work counter-hegemonically. How can you combine your voice with a stranger's to continue in progressing a truly anti-colonial world, a world built on respect and humility?